הבהרה, התוכן המשודר מבוסס על עדויות אישיות של מרואיינים אשר נאמרו על דעתם בלבד. אין לראות בתוכן משום המלצה כלשהי לרבות המלצה רפואית ואו נפשית, ואין לראות בו משום עידוד לביצוע פעולות כלשהן.
Iands Israel. החיים שאחרי החיים.
שלום וברוכים הבאים לפודקאסט המצולם של Iands Israel. היום אנחנו נמצאים עם דוקטור אינגריד הונקלה. היא עברה חוויית סף מוות בגיל 2, ויש לה המון תובנות, היא אישה עם הרבה ידע, והיא גם מתעסקת בזה במקצוע שלה הנוכחי. Hello, דוקטור אינגריד, שלום.
שלום.
Hi, Shalom. It's such an honor to be here with you today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
So my near-death experience happened when I was very young. I was close to 3 years old when I drowned. And the way this accident happened is because at the time I was born and raised in Colombia, where I live with my parents and sisters. And back then my parents, both of my parents work, and they would leave us at the care of a maid. And she was a lady that when my parents were not around, she wouldn't pay attention to anything to us. Then early one morning they left, and my oldest sister, who was close to 4, we had another one that was 1 year old, and I was just like, no one is watching. And we were like, let's go play in the patio. And then we went to the patio, and in this patio there was a tank and the purpose of this tank was for collecting water for hand washing clothes, because back then we didn't have a washing machine. So next to the tank there was a flat surface for scrubbing, and my sister and I saw a ball, and we just look at each other, let's play catch across the tank. And this was a big tank, it held about 900 gallons of water. But back then, who's thinking about any danger? It's like, let's go have fun. And then we found stools, we climbed the tank, and the moment she sat in the flat surface, I was at the edge. This was a thin edge, and I was leaning very precariously in the tank. So what happened is that she had the ball, and she threw the ball at me, but she didn't apply enough force. The ball fell on the surface of the water. It was floating. I thought, oh, I can grab it. I leaned forward, and when I touched the ball, it rolled, and I fell in the tank. Guys, the first feeling was this sense of this water being frigid cold. People have the misconception that because I'm from Colombia, I come from hot weather, but Bogota is high up in the Andes. So the temperature in this water was very cold. It will be, if it's 30, 40 degrees Fahrenheit, it will be equivalent to maybe 4 degrees centigrade, something like that. 3, I don't know, 4 or 5. So this water was pretty chill. And that was the first sense, the water was frigid cold. And it came the first shock. And this is the other thing. I have never been in a pool. I never had the head under the water. I didn't know that if you fall into water, you drown. So it came the sense of like, why I cannot breathe. I cannot breathe. I imagine this moment of just horror. I cannot breathe. And then when I am like through this moment of absolute terror in just a blink, I went from that horror to a state of absolute peace. It's like, ah. So it was that sense that I didn't need to escape from the tank. I didn't need to breathe. I didn't need to just do anything. At that moment was just like, oh, I feel so good. And I like to mention that during this experience that there was a lot of contrast. So one of the things that I mention always is that that first contrast was that when I fell in the tank, the town was made entirely of cement. It was a dark space. It had a roof. It was early in the morning. So the last thing I saw with my eyes open was the darkness of the space. So I am in this complete space being dark when a light, the moment I went into the state of peace, a light came. And it was lit. It was from the bottom of the tank, like if the light of a candle had been lit, and that soft light could illuminate my whole watery surrounding. So on top of the sense of peace, there was light. It was, oh, this feels good. And the other big contrast was that I was living in a house that was very noisy. We had dogs and we had birds, and I had cousins and my sisters. And then there was always noise. And the other thing is that right before I drowned, the last thing I heard was my heart beating in my chest. Imagine being in a state of anxiety, you're drowning, and I could hear my heart beating like a loud drum in my head, in my chest. It was like, and at that moment, all noise was gone. And I experienced what I call the silence behind the silence. Absolute state of peace, calmness. And then later in my life, I crave this silence for the rest of my life. Later, I will hide in closets, I will go chapels, whatever it was, to go back to that silence. But continuing with the experience, now I am in this, oh, this feels so good. And then I started to see bubbles that were suspended in the water, and the bubbles were surrounded by light. And it was by chasing these bubbles that I turned around and I saw a body suspended in the water. And it's when I look at the body, and this is incredible because at that moment I knew that that was my body. It was like, oh, that's me. But it was that incredible sense of there was no surprise. And it was also the sense of familiarity. Like, oh, this already happened before. So I look at the body, and it comes the other very important contrast here, and is that I was born as a very sick child. And I spent the first few years of my life feeling unwell, very unwell. I didn't even know what feeling well was, because for almost 3 years I was sick. So imagine at that moment, I am in this state of absolute well-being. So when I look at the body, I am like, oh no, I'm not going back there. And then I just looked at it and I turned around, and this was amazing because I knew I could make that decision at that moment. And I turned around and I left. And I just, at that moment, started to see flowers. When I turned around, I saw flowers that were blooming from nowhere. And then I was picked by the flowers, and I started to be carried by these flowers. So imagine even the sense of dimension disappeared, because how big these flowers had to be to pick me up. But none of that was in my mind. I just was picked up, and I'm like, whoa, being carried. And I put the analogy that the sense was like, if you're back in the womb, that you don't have to do absolutely anything. You're just being done. Like, and I'm just nothing to wish, nothing to expect, no place to go, just being. And when I am being carried in this just absolute state of being, like in just a flash, just like that, I appear in the maid's room. And I'm looking at her from above, like if I'm floating in the ceiling, and I'm like, oh, that's Maria. And guys, this memory is so clear. All of this is so clear in my mind that I even remember that she was listening to soap opera in the radio. And then, since nothing happened here, in just a blink like that, I appear in my mom's path. I appear in her. She had left early, like I mentioned. She didn't have a car, and she had to cross this whole neighborhood to get to her bus stop. And then she was actually close to her bus stop when I just saw her from above again. And I'm like, oh, that's Mom. And this is what I think blows people's socks away, and is what happened here, because the moment I said these words, my mom stopped. She did not hesitate. She did not give another step forward, nothing. She stopped. And I have to say about my mom, she was a very intuitive person, highly, highly intuitive. But this is the other thing I say to people. It's not just about intuition, but learning to listen to your intuition. And that's what my mom always did. So when she stopped, she had the sense, she knew that something was happening at home with one of her babies. And she turned around and started to run back home. And at that moment I saw her and I'm like, oh, but at that the moment I saw her running, I moved because she was running, and I saw a dog at the end of the street. And because I love animals, the moment I saw the dog and I felt the wanting to be with the dog, I was there. And then I was like, oh, what is happening? And then I turned again and I saw like a park, trees. And the moment I looked at the park, I was there. And I started to play this game of going places. This was so much fun because it's all the sense of time and space of as we know it just had changed, had vanished. And I started to play this game when, again, like everything in this experience was just like that. Again, just like in a second, I appear in a realm that was made of pure, bright, intense, shiny light. Oh, guys, and it was that sense of like, oh, for the first 3 years of my life, I felt that I was home. It was just like, oh, I'm coming back home, and this feels so good. And it's again, the sense of time, this is incredible because it's like, the whole feeling was like if I had left in the morning, to give an analogy, to go to school, and I was just coming back in the afternoon, like when you have had a really hard day of work and you're back home. So it was not even like 3 years had passed. It was just, it felt just like I'm just coming back. And then again, I felt this was amazing because like when you come home and you feel the sense that you're not alone, that you're being welcomed, that you're being received. So it felt incredibly good. And it comes now the part that is just amazing because although I saw my body in the water, up to this point, I didn't have the realization that I was not that persona. At this moment, I realized I'm not that. And I started to have the sense that I was dissolving. Like I was just becoming one with the whole. And it was that sense of, oh, I am more than what these things I know I am. And it's when I realized myself as a being of light. And this went even farther because up to that point, I was still having the sense of self. But it's when I said to people that even that disappeared. It was that sense of, I would just say non-self, or the sense of emptiness. I also call it nothingness. But when I said these words, people get scared, or people ask me about what nothing means. And I said, the moment I tell you what it means, it becomes something. It only can be experienced. So the only thing I can say to them is that this state where there's no conditioning, there's not answers, explanations, there's no color, movement, meaning, labels. And I would just say the only thing I can truly say is like a state of pure presence, just absolute consciousness. Then I am in this state of being just there. When my mom finally arrived home. And this is the only incredible thing. My mom knew exactly where to go. Because we live in a big house. If she stopped in another room, I mean, the body can take, so cannot take that much. But this is incredible. She knew where to go. She directed herself to the back of the house. And this is when I said, and I discovered through time that everything has its purpose. My sister was still there. And she was trying to help me get out of the tank, but she was too small too. So she was almost, it was incredible. She didn't fall too, trying to help me. And she looked at my mom and say, Ingrid is there and I cannot get her. So her purpose was to show my mom, yes, she's there and you have to get her out. My mom jumped in the tank. By then, my mom worked with children and my mom loved, she actually even wanted to be a doctor. So she loved studying medicine, all that. And she had learned some, whatever they taught back then of CPR. So she knew what to do. She got me out of the water. So incredibly, she knew how to work with CPR for children. So look at how amazing, and it's what we call the synchronicities. She got me out of the water. She knew what to do. But what she was doing, whatever she was doing, I was far gone. I wasn't even feeling anything. I'm like, not even any intention to come back, nothing. And again, like everything I mentioned in this experience, in just a flash, I felt that I had jumped from the tallest building in the world. And there was nothing I could do to stop this. And it was like, in my case, nobody asked me, you want to go back or you want to, no, I was pushed from the building and I'm like, no, I'm fighting this. I don't want to, no. And I was being pulled. I was being like sucked back, like vacuumed into the body. And I knew I was back when all the feelings of discomfort, the feelings of the pain, because like I said to you, I was born in a sick body. So this sense of like, I'm back to this discomfort, the sense of being cold, the sense of not wanting to be here, the lack of freedom came back. And oh guys, I was very unhappy, very unhappy. And what happened next was still hard because when I came back, I had a sense of an awareness. I know it's an awareness I didn't have before, because when I saw my parents, I just started to think, it was the sense of like, I felt them, not just like my parents, I felt them as my equal, because I had experienced this state of oneness. When I looked at my body, imagine after experiencing all that, having so much awareness, I looked at my body and I'm like, I am not this child. I'm not this child. So after that, the rest of my life, I never felt like I was a child. And I had this clarity of things, and I couldn't relate with other children. I would look at other children and say, what is happening to these people? They don't know anything. So it was really hard. And the other thing, I would look at myself in the mirror and say to my mom, my parents, you don't understand, I'm not this. What am I doing here? This is not my name. I should not be here. And I would cry. So for my parents, it was really hard. They didn't know, imagine early 70s. They didn't know what to deal with this. They never heard anything related with this. They didn't know what happened. And the other thing is that I came with, this was another way to validate that there was something different with this child, because I came back and I had also abilities I didn't have before. So no long after my NDE, I could read and write. I'm telling you, I'm just close to 3 years old. I could put together complex puzzles. See, they started to see that my mom was a teacher, started to see these things in me. I could resolve mathematical problems, and that continued for the rest of my life. And when I went to school and when I was learning subjects later, to me was that sense of clarity, like all this was coming back to me. And I would say it was the sense, I'm not learning this, I'm just remembering. And why do I say this? Because this is the other thing I experienced, was when I had my near-death experience, and later in life, as I study and as I experience more things, it was the knowing that I was an eternal being. And this is not the first time I have been here. I have had many other lives. Later, when I was 17, I was able to remember many past lives. And it was the knowing that, oh, there's many things I already know. I'm just remembering these things. So this was pretty hard, but guys, when I was going through the hardest of all, not being able to relate, I became really angry. I didn't want to be here. I was mad at everybody. Is when the help that I needed came, and it actually came in the most remarkable way, because it's when I started to see and communicate with what I call beings of light. So the way this happened is that right after my near-death experience, I started to have, we didn't know what that was at the time, but now knowing all I know, I realized I was having out-of-body experiences. And every time I went to sleep, I would just go back to that realm of the light. And it wasn't just, at the beginning, it was not like easy cake. It was like I would experience things that were, it felt a little disturbing. It was the sense of seeing colors, hearing sounds I have never heard here, going through frequencies, changes of frequency I have never experienced here, all kind of stuff that was kind of shocking, but I was taken to the realm of the light, and I'm like, oh, I want to do that. And then in one of these journeys, one day, I was surrounded by starlight figures that were shining in all different colors. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. So imagine, guys, that I was so incredibly connected with this, that being so young, all I wanted to do at that moment of my life was to sleep. You guys would wonder about the cleaning lady. Of course, she would fire, but my parents kept working, so they hired another one. And guess what? This one, what would you do if a child is sleeping and leaving you alone doing your chores? You let the guy sleep, the kid sleep. So that was perfect, because she would let me sleep for hours and I would just be in my out-of-body experiences. So in another one of these journeys, I saw a being of light. I saw a light. At the moment, I didn't call it being of light, but I saw a light, and it was shining intense gold, like absolutely beautiful. And the light approached me. And when the light came closer to me, it shaped itself into a human form, and it touched me. And what I understand and know now, it was trying to show me I am like you. Because when it shaped itself as a human, as a body, I looked at it and I said, oh, you are a being of light. That's why I call them beings of light. And then it was like, and at that moment in that experience, I woke up. But guess what, guys? Now I wanted to sleep all the time. So I couldn't be the girl that is left forever. So things have to come to balance. And it was when one day now I'm close to 4 years old. I'm 4 years old. I'm taking a shower and I'm just relaxing there in the shower, when I saw a huge, bright blue being of light in the bathroom. And it's when I said, oh, now the beings of light are here. And that it's not me out of wanting to sleep all the time, because now I started to see them everywhere. And then, oh, when I started to see them, like I said, I mentioned to you before, up to this point, I was still being very angry, very rebellious. I slept all the time. I didn't want to be with anybody. But once I started to see them here and have this sense of that presence, I started to heal. I started to feel the sense, and I could now be open to play with my sisters, to talk with my parents, to be awake, to wanting to eat. And what that taught me later in my life, not at that moment, I didn't have that clarity, but later in my life, I realized that I was feeling so good and enjoying the presence of the beings of light and feeling so loved that realization came to me. Oh, home is not a place, because I thought every time I had to go there to these out body experiences to be in the light. And when I started to experience it here, I said, oh, home is not a place, it's a state of being. Because I feel so good here. I didn't have to go anywhere else. So I started to heal, talk to my sisters, play. But it came the other really interesting thing. This was really cool because I did not have attachment to my name or my persona. So there was a time when the lady was calling me to dinner. Ingrid, it's time for dinner, Ingrid. And I'm like, don't call me like that. That's not my name. And then she came because I wasn't coming. I wasn't an easy child. So she came and she said like, Ingrid, we're calling you for dinner. And I said, do not call me like that. That is not my name. Then she looked at me and she's like, then what is your name? What should I call you? And I said, I do not need one. Of course, she's like, okay. Then they got mad at me because I was throwing this tantrum and sent me to bed. And I'm crying. And it's when the beings of light, up to this point, I could see them. I could smell them. When there was a lot of the presence of the beings of light were very strong, I could smell flowers, like roses. It was incredible. Like, oh, the beings of light are here. Or I could sense, I could know, but now this was the first time I was able to hear. And it's when I heard the voice saying to me in a very loving manner, soft, it's going to take time, almost like a secret. It's telling me a secret, a whisper. It's going to take time for them to understand that names are not needed in the realm of the light. And it's when I was like, oh. And they said to me, like, you already know. And that gave me so much peace, guys, because it was the sense I'm not crazy. It was the sense I'm not just talking nonsense. It was the sense of like, oh, of course, in the realm of the light, you don't need labels. It doesn't mean later, of course, I understood and learned that here in our human experience, we're like a basket. We have a name, profession, and all that we appreciate and is beautiful. But in the realm of the light, it's not needed. So because I came from that near-death experience and didn't know any different, that's how I just felt. So that gave me peace. And the other incredible thing was also when they said to me, Ingrid, all the experiences that you're having and all the ones that you are going to have are all gifts. Gifts to share with others someday when they're ready to understand. So even at a very short age, they were telling me, look, not everybody is ready to understand or listen what you were saying. And all of these, they said, is not for you to keep. Someday you will give it. So that was absolutely amazing. The other thing they said, this wasn't a warning, but they say, don't talk to others about this because they're not going to understand. And of course, being so young, I'm like, what is not to understand? And they said, no, they're not going. And I realized that pretty soon, that if I would mention things, and I started to kindergarten later and people were not. And the other thing that is amazing that the part that also helped a lot with all this process was the validation I got from my mom. Because up to that point, I felt alone. I felt nobody understood. I could not, like I mentioned to you, I will see people and think, what is happening to all these people? It was really difficult. So I would talk and they would look at me like if I was talking in Chinese. So it was like, what, another language nobody could understand. So at that moment, it was, I went to school when I was 5 years old. I started kindergarten. And what happened was amazing because the beings of light have told me that I shouldn't say anything because, and I already seen it, prove it, yeah, they don't get anything. I started to do drawings. So I started, children, we have to express ourselves somehow. It has to come out. So I started to paint and I started to do drawings and painting the beings of light everywhere. I was just, the reading book, whatever, and the teacher got pretty curious, like, what is going on? So she came to me and she's like, what are those? What is this? The sun and the stars? Because that's how I paint, just live like that. And I said, no, they are my friends, the beings of light. And she's like, ooh. And they already thought that I was different because I wouldn't play with nobody. I was quiet. I was observing. I would sit and observe. And they thought this child is weird. So it's when she thought, oh, she's having imaginary friends. Let's call your parents. And of course, I felt very apprehensive. And I felt that something was wrong with me. And it's when my mom came to school. And it's when we also realized that I was seeing what we call auras. I didn't know other people couldn't see this, but I was doing all my drawings with auras. So the teacher is showing all these drawings and all this to my mom, and my mom is looking. And there's a moment I wanted so bad, guys, someone to believe me. And I turned to my mom and I said, Mom, these are the colors that we wear, and these are my friends, the beings of light. And my mom, being a teacher and knowing that I could get in trouble, she looked at me with these mom eyes, like pretty much like, silence. And I'm like, I just got it immediately. And then at that moment, my mom said to the teacher, this is just a phase, we're going to work it. Don't worry, blah. And we left. And I just thought, oh no, there's something wrong with me. And I was so sad. And it was in the way home that my mom turned around and said, I believe you. I believe you because I also can see things that others cannot. She was really ostracized. And then she said to me, for your own good, you have to remain quiet. You can talk to me. So that validates what the beings of light has said to me. The time will come when you can talk about it.
Your language is so rich and beautiful that when you talk about it, I feel like I'm in a movie, but I not only can I see it, but I can really feel what you're saying. When you mean awareness, you mean it's a matter of consciousness? And is there a difference then between consciousness and light?
Maybe we can even talk about consciousness and awareness and light, yes, because, and I like when you say, when you ask me about light and consciousness too, because I call it the light of consciousness. We are the light of consciousness. And what is awareness is the realization that we are that light. Is becoming aware that I am that. And there's a whole process to bring awareness. That's why, guys, meditation or prayer has been something that, if you look about any scripture in centuries, everybody is mentioning the only way to get there is by doing what? Quieting the mind. And we start with practices of what? Concentration. They said, master your breathing and you don't need to control your mind. So it's self-mastery. The moment you start that's why all these styles of meditation at the beginning, they are not even, should be called meditation, it's concentration, practices of like, you concentrate in a sound, in a mantra, in a body part, in
a prayer.
Whatever it is. Yeah, prayer, a prayer, that's beautiful. And after that, contemplation happens. It's when you start now, you have that connection, start connecting with the true nature of who you are, that silence, that peace, that calmness, consciousness itself. And it's beautiful because why is it called, I also love the word, the light of awareness, because the more you start realizing, the more you start observing who you are, the more you focus your mind, the more you start doing your practices, you're realizing, oh, which happened to me with my near-death experience. And after that, I'm not my body. Who is thinking this thought? Who is thinking that is thinking that thought? I'm thinking. You start going deeper and deeper and deeper. So that's the light of awareness. You start going in just that light. You know, I have this beautiful analogy. There was a moment that the beings of light were talking about, or someone we were discussing with a group about frequencies. Yes. High frequency, low frequency, the frequency. I'm thinking about all these frequencies, and I went to sleep, and I just wake up like at 3 in the morning, and the beings of light said to me, just like that, it just comes. And they say, there is only one true frequency, God's frequency, or what we call source frequency, the creator frequency, consciousness frequency. See, we just give it names depending how we feel better. Then I am like, well, and then they give me this beautiful analogy just to be able to put it all together when we talk about light, consciousness, awareness. So they show me a light bulb, just like that lamp back there, a light bulb that was on. And they said, think that you are this light bulb and you shine in this light. That's why you're pure. And then what happened? You start getting conditioned by other people's thinking, by other people's beliefs, by your culture, by your ancestors, by your religion, by your school, by your own experiences, by other people. And what do? You start putting a shade. The first thing you put a shade on top of that bulb. And I love to keep this cloth here because I love to show the analogy. So I am that beautiful shining light of consciousness, pure, innocent, wholeness. And what do I do with all the consciousness? What happened?
Yes.
And another layer, and another layer, and another layer. What happened? The more you layer it, there would be a moment where your light is not shining. It doesn't appear to be shining. It is always on, but it doesn't appear to be shining. What you're doing, you lower your vibrational frequency, you're trapped. And at that moment is when you have the sense of, I have lost my authentic self. And what happened when this presents in your life? A lot of challenge. Why? Because you want, in reality, who's putting these challenges? Ourselves, because we want to rediscover, reconnect with the truth that we are. So things start presenting is like shaking us out, shaking all this layering out. It has to come out. And then what happened? We start like something, even sometimes, sadly, it has to happen through a lot of suffering. But we don't get shaken to realize I have to start thinking, feeling, realizing deeper. Yeah. So, and I said to people, what happened when you cut an onion? You know how onions have many layers? You want to go to the core of the onion. What happened when you peel an onion? You cry a lot.
Yeah. Yes.
Because we're so attached to these conditionings and it hurts. And then little by little, these start falling. So what is high vibrational frequency? The less layers you have, the more you're connecting with the whole that you are.
That's a beautiful description.
The beings of light are amazing. Yeah.
Are we supposed to use the suffering in order to I'm trying to ask you a question through your own metaphor, that the layers are actually the suffering and the hardships. And I mean, they're there for a purpose. Are we supposed to use them in order to peel them back and remember what our true self is?
Yeah, the layers are the conditioning. So what happened is that the more conditioning we have, and I think you mentioned this possible question, we project, we start projecting into the world. Why is the projection there? Because in truth, what is our real purpose? To reconnect with the true nature that we are. So what we're going to do, find a way to shake it, even if we're not realizing it, but that's what we really want, to reconnect with the pureness that we are. But there's so many layers that we cannot figure it out. So it's when the world has to present to us, for us to shake it. And if we don't realize it, challenges will come. But this is something really, really important. And is that challenge doesn't need to turn into suffering. See, suffering only happens when we still trapped in the victimhood mentality. So I said to people, say that a challenge comes. And if you don't have yet any sense of awareness or realizing that your challenges are opportunities to grow, then what happened? That challenge come and it turned into story. The story of me and poor me. And that's when you get trapped in what I call the cul-de-sac of suffering. Then we create a story. Oh, poor me, and this happened to me. And that is what brings suffering. And that has many more. When you go into that line, even the physiological way, you start releasing stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, you start affecting your body. But what happened when you make the decision to stop and ask yourself at that moment, what that is for? Why is this happening? The moment you stop, oh, now you created a different path. At that moment is when this is what I call the light. You choose clarity. What is like clarity? Understanding. Yes. Then you stop. That circuit is like, this is the other analogy. It's like when you get into your car and you put the car you don't put the car in gear, you turn it on, you press the gas, but you didn't put the car in gear, you don't go anywhere. So you have to have a moment of awareness, stop and realize, oh, I have to put the car in gear in order to move. So same thing here. Look, this is incredible about when people talk about free will. I said, in reality, people don't have a clue what free will is. They think that they have free will because they can choose the clothing they wear, the food that they eat, the career that they study. And I said, Guess what? The food that you eat is conditioned by your culture. The career that you chose is conditioned by maybe your family, your culture, your ancestors, your surrounding, your environment. The clothes, if you were born in the Amazons with the Indians, you will eat other food, you will wear other clothes, you will choose a different thing to do. So that's not free will, that's free of choice. True free will, guys, the true free will is when you are in this cul-de-sac of suffering and you stop and you make the decision to choose the path of clarity. That's the true free will.
What you choose to identify with.
Exactly. Yeah. Is that decision we make. That's beautiful what you say, because I put this other analogy that the beings of light brought to me. They showed me a room like this. And they said, what is something in the room that never, ever, ever, ever changes? Just look around. The space in the room. This omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, always there is what is called the eternal subject. And then in the room, there's all this furniture. I can put more furniture, I can remove it, I can move it around, I can fill the room with furniture to the top, break it, give it away. So they said, Yes, look at that. So what the point here is what you are identifying with. So I'm so glad you mentioned that, Henry, because they said, are you identifying with the furniture in the room or with the space in the room? If you put your sense of identity in the furniture in the room, you're going to suffer because it's impermanent, because it's just, you can do whatever you want to it. When you put yourself of identity in the space in the room, guess what? You realize, I am that presence. I am that spaciousness. I am that eternal subject.
Amazing.
And it's when you become the creator of your reality. When you become the creator. When you are identified with the furniture in the room, you become the puppet of your reality. And me and for me and my story and me, then you stopped. Every time you stop, and you know, life is so incredibly beautiful and amazing that you have the choice to stop at every single moment. You don't have to wait until tomorrow. It's not vengeful with you that you cannot do it because now you're being punished. It's your decision. It's my decision here and now.
I heard you once speak about a point in your life where you felt very lonely. And you had asked yourself, why me? Why is all this happening to me? And then you said that you had gone to therapy. And I remember exactly what you said, that your therapist had said to you, why not you? And that you had this epiphany, this understanding that everything that was suffering in your life wasn't things that were caused to you. It didn't happen to you. And you started to see yourself as the cause of things, as the dominant factor in your life. And I wanted to ask you, what is the importance of living with this intention to influence for ourselves and also on a collective level?
I'm going to give you an analogy that is very powerful. There was a guy that would come every 2 weeks or something to cut the grass in our house. So this is actually something that happened. And then the guy will come and cut the grass. And every time this guy came, guys, every time he came, he complained. He always complained. And he was like, oh God, this guy, but it was a lot of complaint. So, but we didn't fire him because he was good at doing his work. So it was like, this guy. And there was a day he came and he was complaining so much that I kind of had it. I just didn't say anything. He left. I went for my walking meditation and I asked the beings of light, why this guy complains so much? He complains because you complain.
It's a projection. Like a
exactly. It's when you were asking me, when I understood nothing is happening to me, it's happening for me. That guy meant to bring that complaint so I could see an aspect in me that needed to be corrected. So I started to observe myself. And again, I call it the light of awareness. What happened the moment you turn on the light in a room? You're not in the dark anymore. Now I have this awareness. Maybe I didn't address my whole complaint at that moment, but I was aware. And the moment I brought that light of awareness into my being, I'm like, whoa. And I started to make the decision to work with my complaint. And it doesn't matter the size of the complaint, guys. A complaint is a complaint. Not a little big. And then guess what happened after that? This is what is going to blow you away. The guy kept coming for so many more years after that. He never, ever complained again.
I think it's a really beautiful way of looking at life and looking at experiences and seeing that everything comes to us is an opportunity to learn, and it's actually a gift, and that the changes that we want to change things, that they're never on the outside. It's never the other person. It's never that thing. It's never the job. It's never the boyfriend. It's not the bank account. It's something internal within yourself.
Yes, look, this is another really cool one. My husband come one day and he had this back pain. And he's like, oh, I'm going to go get a massage because my back hurts so much. Oh, okay, honey, go get your massage. At that moment, I heard the beings of light said, he's not going to heal. And I said, oh, that sounds mean. And I'm like, what? And they just said, no, because he's trapped in a result. So that was a way to show me what was happening. And they said, look, people spend hours, energy, all their life in what is already manifested. So they gave me an analogy at this point. They said, look at 1 + 1 = 2. The 2 is a result. There's nothing you can do to change that 2. Don't waste your energy there. Like you were just saying right now, we put our focus of attention in the outer reality, what is already manifested. They said, in order to change this result, you have to go inside the equation. You have to go within. And the moment you go within, connect with your inner wisdom, become an aware being, realize who you truly are. Guess what? Now 1 + 2 = 3. You created a new reality.
Yes.
I've heard you talk about, I don't know if that's the term that you use, but you talked about a collective responsibility. And you said each person that is aware and remembers that they are a light is a light, but when a lot, then it becomes a flame. Can you talk about that a little bit from what you've learned and experienced? What are we supposed to do? Collectively go back to this feeling of oneness.
Yes, so you know, this idea of collective, it can be a little tricky, okay? Because sometimes when we think in terms of the collective, we can disempower ourselves. The beings of light said to me, do not be concerned about what others do. Not because you don't care, but because you care so much that you're concerned with you. You're concerned with, am I shining my light? Because if each one of us, they gave me the example of an empty cup. Empty your cup, and they showed me the cup of the collective. Each one of us that empty our cup, which means that we reconnect with the truth that we are. When you become calm, you become kind.
Yes.
Open, present. So if each one of us is doing the work, we don't even have to think about the collective. It happens. They showed me a big cup and he said, imagine each one of us doing the work, each one of us emptying our own cup. There will be a moment where we reach the tipping point. The more of each one of us do the work, one day it will happen. Mm-hmm. So they say, do not think in terms of the collective because that's really, really tricky. They give me this beautiful example. They show me a castle, a big castle, and the castle is a mess. So what is the analogy trying to show? The collective, the world that we can perceive as this is a mess. But then they said to me, the moment you make the decision to organize that whole castle in one day, what happened? You disempower yourself. Oh gosh, you're already exhausted. You didn't even do anything. And you're like, I can't, really? But what happened when you make the wise decision of, you know what, I'm going to go room by room, space by space. I cannot even tackle a room. I go to the table, I go to the little space. And little by little, you start organizing that space. What that means, be present, be calm, little by little. And then you accomplish that little part and then you call someone else, look what I was able to do. You're not imposing it, you're sharing it, or help empty the cup of another person. And little by little, the beings of light show me all of us are like pillars of light.
Beautiful.
And every awakened being that is able to shine the light for another, start creating a thread of light, and we start all connecting. In the moment you just, how am I doing? Am I being the peace I'm looking in the world? Am I being kind? Am I being conscious? Am I being loving? Or you're already doing the work? Each one of us, your purpose is to be the light. Be that. And your mission is to shine it, period.
This was really just so revealing and so interesting and lovely.
Thank you so much, and hope to speak to you soon.
Yes, thank you so much for having me here. I'm so blessed and so honored to be able to share. Thank you for shining your light.